Welcome to 18th Century Cooking. I'm your host, John Townsend, and in this episode, we'll be making a delicious dessert cake with the main ingredient of potatoes. Thanks for joining us today as we savor the flavors and the aromas of the 18th century. So this particular recipe comes from the dessert section of Amelia Simmons's American Cookery Cookbook from 1797's 18th century, and it's in the cakes section. So cake, plum cake, plain cake, another plain cake, a rich cake, and then just underneath a rich cake is potato cake. When I think potato cakes, I think savory, I think sort of like a biscuit, maybe even with cheese on it or something like that. It's nothing like that whatsoever. This is a sweet, small, I don't know. We're just gonna have to make it to find out. Here is the recipe out of American Cookery. Potato cake. Boil potatoes, peel and pound them. Add yolks of eggs, wine, and melted butter. Work with flour into paste. Shape as you please. Bake and pour over them melted butter, wine, and sugar. This is a strange little recipe. I mean, potatoes, I get that. I get the flour. We've got egg yolks, yes, but we have wine and melted butter in the cake itself. And then we pour over them a classic pudding sauce of the 18th century. So something that you would put on a boiled pudding. Oh, this is going to be really, really interesting. And I guess we have to interpret this too a lot because no ingredient amounts whatsoever. We have no idea. We just have to kind of guess as to where we're going to go with this. How much flour do we put in? How much wine? We have no idea. So we're going to have fun with this one. We got our mashed potatoes all mashed up in here nicely, and I've already added the liquid ingredients. About a half a cup of white wine. We have 3 egg yolks, just the yolks in here, so it's nice and yellow. And I added 2 ounces of melted butter. And so we've got, a batter consistency. And now it's time to add our flour until we get to what they call, or whatever we call, right, a paste. This is the question, right? How much flour do we need to add before we get to the consistency we need? And I mean, we don't even need to measure this. We're just gonna start adding it in until we get to that paste consistency. I love this kind of recipe because we get to do all the interpretation. We get to experiment and find the best way, at least that we think this should turn out. We know this should be thick enough that it's a paste. And it needs to hold its shape because we're gonna cut it into shapes. So I want this kind of thick, I think. And I think we'll cut them so that they're a ½ inch thick, something like that. That ought to bake up nicely. We baked these potato cakes at 350 degrees for 20 minutes. I expected them to get a little browner, but they didn't. I don't think it would matter how long we left them in the oven. They weren't going to get any browner. So they're done. And, you know, let's see. Here's one that doesn't have much pudding sauce. So I kind of poured pudding sauce over these already. Without the pudding sauce, they're plain. I'll just call them plain. They have a really good texture, not too dense, not what you expect for, you know, light and fluffy, like a biscuit maybe, but they have a very, very good consistency. Now, pudding sauce. That's the real question here. Got a whole bunch of pudding sauce down here. They're really good with the pudding sauce. There's a reason why the pudding sauce is in the recipe, obviously. This pudding sauce, it's 1 part wine, 1 part melted butter, and 1 part sugar. And it's like, well, frosting on the cake, really. It's that thing that sets it off. Cake all by itself, kind of plain, but put that frosting on there and whoa, it's really good. Same thing that's going on with these guys. And don't forget the wine in this pudding sauce. It really makes a very, very big difference. I think it's one of those things that's missing out of our sort of palate today. We're expecting sort of, you know, frosting with just lots of sugar and, you know, butter or whatever. But the wine gives it a totally different edge and a very, very, really good and different flavor. And I really like it, especially on these. And you can kind of see why the potato cakes on one hand are kind of plain, and then we have this wonderful pudding sauce that sets that off in a very, very good way. It does seem like the pudding sauce has stolen the show here. If you want an excellent episode where we really dig into pudding sauce, check this episode out.